Somewhere between a broken cargo seal and a cold meal, Dara Osai decided that Orin 7 was the strangest place she had ever docked. She had been to 41 stations in 6 years of hauling freight across the Accord lanes. She had landed on platforms built inside hollowed moons, on rotating rings that made your inner ear scream, and once on a station that was technically still on fire when she touched down. None of them felt like this. Orin 7 was quiet in the wrong way. The loading docks were busy, ships coming and going, forklifts moving crates, the usual noise of commerce, but the voices were low. The alien dockworkers kept their eyes on the floor. The security patrols, which should have been 2 officers per corridor, were now 8. Every few minutes, a soft chime rang through the station's public speakers, and nobody reacted to it, which meant everyone already knew what it meant. Dara pulled her jacket tighter and walked toward the cargo registry desk. Borin was already there, arguing in his usual way, which was less like arguing and more like organized panicking. He was a Vorkai, 4 arms, pale gray skin, eyes that were too large for his face, and showed every emotion he had ever felt at full volume. Right now they showed fear. "We should go back to the ship," he said the moment Dara reached him. "We haven't filed the manifest yet. We can file it from orbit." Dara took the registration tablet from the desk worker, a tired-looking Korasi who handed it over without meeting her eyes. "What is going on?" she asked the worker directly. The worker glanced at the nearest security patrol and said, very quietly, "Drachari delegation. Arrived last night. Hatchling on board." Dara signed the manifest, and the hatchling is gone. Borin made a sound like a small engine failing. Dara handed the tablet back. "Gone as in escaped or gone as in something bad happened?" "Escaped into the station 2 hours ago." The worker lowered their voice further. "If it is not found calm and unhurt before the ambassador loses patience, the warship in orbit will not wait for diplomacy." Dara thanked them and walked away. Borin followed, all 4 arms crossed in various combinations of worry. "You heard that," he said. "A Drachari warship, Dara, a warship." "I heard. We should leave." "We have 12 tons of processed grain in our hold that someone on this station paid for. We are not leaving." Borin opened his mouth. Dara was already scanning the corridor ahead. Warden Sleth's announcement came through the speakers 10 minutes later. His voice was the voice of someone who had been told to sound calm and had not entirely succeeded. All docked crews were to remain near their ships. If anyone encountered the hatchling, and here his voice tightened, "Do not approach it. Do not speak to it. Do not make sudden movements. Alert station security using Channel 4 immediately and wait for a trained response team." He repeated, with great emphasis, that under no circumstances should any non-Drachari attempt to interact with the hatchling. Dara listened to all of it while walking slowly down Corridor 7, which was marked as restricted. She had noticed something on the way in from the docks. Most people would not have noticed it. It was small, a mark on the lower section of the wall near a maintenance access hatch, roughly at knee height, roughly the size of a thumb. Dark at the center, slightly scorched at the edge, still warm when she brushed it with her fingers. Something small had been here, something that breathed heat. And the mark was aimed upward, which meant whatever made it had been moving fast and low and had then gone up. She looked at the maintenance hatch, standard latch, rated for small maintenance drones. The latch was not quite closed. There was a tiny scratch on the metal that had not been there long. Borin appeared at her shoulder. "That is a restricted corridor." "Yes." Warden Sleth said to stay near our ship. "He did." "You are not near our ship." "No." Borin looked at the hatch. He looked at the corridor. He looked at the security patrol at the far end that had not yet seen them. Then he looked at Dara with all the exhaustion of someone who had been her co-pilot for 3 years and had stopped being surprised while never quite stopping being afraid. "I will be in the ship," he said. "Good idea." She opened the hatch and went in. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and warm, the kind of warm that came from coolant pipes and recycled air rather than anything natural. It smelled like metal and something else faint, like smoke after a fire is already out. Dara moved slowly. She had learned as a child that you do not rush towards something small and unknown. You move at the speed of patience. 20 meters in, she found the second scorch mark, then a third. The trail went up. She followed it. The upper maintenance shafts of Orin 7 were not built for comfort. They were built for small repair drones and the occasional desperate engineer, and they showed it. Low ceilings, exposed conduit bundles, a permanent vibration from the station's rotation that you felt more in your teeth than your feet. Dara moved through them on her hands and knees, following a trail that kept revealing itself in small ways. A scorch mark here, a claw scratch there, barely visible, just a slight brightening of the metal where something sharp had gripped and pushed off. The scratches were evenly spaced. Whatever made them was moving with purpose, not panic. She had been following the trail for about 12 minutes when she heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of sound shifting. The tunnel was full of background noise, the hum of pipes, the whir of ventilation, the distant clank of the station going about its business. But ahead of her, something in that noise changed. A small displacement, something breathing that was not a machine. Dara stopped. She stayed perfectly still for 10 seconds. Then she sat down, cross-legged, in the tunnel and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from behind a cluster of coolant pipes on the left side of the tunnel, a head appeared. It was roughly triangular, scaled in colors that shifted between deep green and copper depending on how the light hit it. Two eyes, the color of melted bronze, looked at Dara with the particular expression of someone who has been caught but is not yet ready to admit it. Two small nostrils flared. A thin ribbon of smoke drifted upward from them and then dissolved in the ventilation current. The hatchling was about the size of a large dog. Its wings were folded tight against its body. Its tail curled behind it in a slow, thoughtful arc. It looked at Dara. Dara looked at it. She did not reach toward it. She did not speak. She did not move at all. The hatchling tilted its head to the left, then the right. Its nostrils worked steadily. Then it looked past Dara, back down the tunnel, with an expression that was unmistakably calculating. That was the moment Dara understood what she was looking at. She had been around animals her whole life, her grandmother's farm, the wildlife corridors near their town, summers spent learning to be still and quiet and patient in places where stillness and quiet were the only currency that bought you anything. She knew the difference between a creature that was frightened and a creature that was occupied. She knew the body language of play. The hatchling was not hiding from the search teams because it was scared. It was hiding from them because it was winning. She watched it glance back down the tunnel again, and she understood. It had infrared sight or something close to it. It could see the heat signatures of the security teams below. It had been tracking them through the walls and moving ahead of them for hours, staying just far enough ahead to be unfindable, and it was having the time of its short life doing it. It was cheating at its own game of hide-and-seek. And it was magnificent at it. Dara took a slow breath. Then she said very quietly, "I see you, and you are absolutely cheating." The hatchling's eyes snapped back to her. It went completely still. Dara pointed down the tunnel. "They can't see through walls. You can, that's cheating." She kept her voice level, conversational, the way you talk to something that doesn't know your language but can hear your tone perfectly. "I'm not going to tell on you, but I want you to know that I know." The hatchling stared at her. Then it made a sound. It was a low sound, soft and warbling, and it rose at the end like a question that had gotten pleasantly distracted on the way up. It sounded like water finding a new path. It sounded like something trying very hard not to be too pleased with itself. Dara decided then and there that it was the best sound she had ever heard. She covered her eyes with both hands. "Fine." She said, 1 through 10, "No cheating this time." She counted. When she opened her eyes, the hatchling was gone. It took her 4 minutes to find it, wedged behind a secondary ventilation cover it had somehow partially unscrewed, tail curled perfectly out of sight, absolutely still. When she found it, it exploded out of the hiding spot, skidded sideways on the smooth tunnel floor, bounced off a pipe, and let out a sharp huff of fire that left a scorch mark the size of Dara's palm on the wall beside her. Not aimed at her, aimed at the ceiling. Pure, involuntary delight. Dara laughed. It surprised her. She had not expected to laugh, but it came out easy and real, and the hatchling froze when it heard it, head tilted again, nostrils wide open. They played 4 more rounds. The hatchling hid better each time. Dara found it each time, mostly because it could not fully suppress the faint glow its scales gave off when it was excited. On the 5th round, Dara counted, opened her eyes, and found nothing. She searched every reachable section of the shaft. She checked behind every pipe cluster, every panel, every dark corner. She lay flat and looked down side passages. She listened. Nothing. Then, from somewhere much further away, somewhere that made no sense given the distance and the sealed corridors between here and there, she heard a single, faint, warbling chirp. She knew that sound now. It was very pleased with itself. Dara sat back on her heels in the empty maintenance shaft and stared at the wall. "Where did you go?" she whispered. The Cassidy's Run was a mid-range freight hauler, practical, battered, reliable in the way old boots are reliable, and Dara had lived in it long enough that she could walk its corridors in total darkness and never touch a wall. She knew every sound it made, every smell it carried, every draft from every slightly misaligned ventilation cover. Which was why, the moment she climbed back through the docking tube from Orange 7 and stepped through the inner door, she knew something was different. The air was warmer than it should have been, not alarmingly so, just warm, the way a room is warm when something alive has been sleeping in it. And there was a smell, faint, unfamiliar, like the inside of a stone fireplace after the fire had been out for a while. Dara walked down the short corridor to the crew quarters, 3 bunks on the left wall. Her bunk was the far one. She had left her flight jacket on it that morning, brown, worn at both elbows, her grandmother's initials stitched into the inside collar in faded thread. The jacket was now a nest. The hatchling was curled inside it, wings folded flat, all 4 legs tucked under its body, tail wrapped around itself. Its scales had shifted to a darker shade, deep green, nearly black at the edges, the kind of color Dara associated, even in animals she knew nothing about, with sleep and warmth and safety. One nostril was producing a thin, steady ribbon of smoke that curled upward and then got pulled away by the ventilation. Its eyes were fully closed. Its chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. It had somehow navigated from the upper maintenance shafts of Orange 7, through multiple sealed corridors, across a pressurized docking tube, through the ship's outer hatch, which had been on autolock, and had found the one bunk that smelled like someone lived in it. And it was now sleeping in it, with the confidence of something that had planned to end up exactly here. Dara stood in the doorway for a long time. Then she went to the cockpit and pressed the comms channel for Borin. He answered on the second tone. She could hear, from the background noise, that he was in a dockside food kiosk, which was his reliable response to any situation he could not solve through action. "She is in my bunk," Dara said. A pause. "Who is?" "The hatchling." A longer pause. "Dara." "She is asleep. She nested in my jacket." The sound from the background of Borin's comm disappeared, which meant he had stood up and moved somewhere quieter. When he spoke again, his voice had the careful tone of someone selecting their words with both hands. "You need to call Warden Sleth." "I know. Right now, immediately, before she wakes up in an unfamiliar place and does something that brings a warship into range of our hull." "I know. You are not calling Warden Sleth." "I'm thinking about how to call Warden Sleth." "Those are different things." Dara watched the hatchling breathe. The ribbon of smoke from its nostril curled and disappeared. Its tail twitched once, the way a sleeping animal's tail does when it's dreaming about something fast. The problem was not that Dara did not want to make the call. The problem was that she had a very clear picture in her head of what would happen when she did. Within minutes, there would be uniformed officers at the docking tube. Lights, voices, equipment. The whole mechanical response of an institution that had been embarrassed for 2 hours and was going to make up for it with efficiency. And the hatchling would wake up to all of that. A frightened Drachari infant, alone, surrounded by strangers, in a metal box. Dara had seen what frightened animals did. She had also read the briefing documents about Drachari hatchlings that came with any cargo permit issued near their territorial space. A distress call from an infant could be heard on Drachari instruments from a significant distance. It was biological, involuntary, and it was what brought warships. If she wakes up scared, Dara said, the ship in orbit hears it before we can do anything. Borin was quiet. She picked this place, Dara continued. She crossed the whole station to get here. She is not scared right now. She is sleeping. She paused. The best thing I can do is make sure she stays that way until I can get the right person to come pick her up. Maury silence. Then Borin said, you are not going to survive this job long enough to retire. I'm not dead yet. The day is young. Dara opened the command channel and composed a message to Warden Sleth. She wrote it twice. The first version sounded like a report. The second version sounded like what it actually was, a calm person explaining a situation to someone who was going to be very uncalm about it and trying to get them there faster. She sent the second version. The hatchling shifted in its sleep. One wing unfolded slightly, then folded back. Its scales caught the low bunk light and threw copper reflections across the ceiling. Dara leaned against the corridor wall and waited. Sleth's response came in 4 seconds. She had not known he could type that fast. Do not move, do not speak to the hatchling. The ambassador is already walking. Dara read it twice, looked back at the sleeping hatchling, looked at the message again. Already walking, she said to the empty corridor. Somewhere across Orin 7, the most powerful diplomat in the sector was moving toward her ship. She straightened her collar. The docking tube seal pressurized with a soft clunk, and then Ambassador Vaughn stepped through. He was alone, as Dara had asked. He had also apparently come without armor, which she learned later was significant. The Drachari did not remove their ceremonial plates for anyone they considered a potential threat. He wore a long coat of dark material that moved like woven stone, and he filled the docking corridor the way a mountain fills a valley, not aggressively, just completely. He was taller than any other species Dara had stood next to by more than half a meter. His scales were darker than the hatchlings, deep charcoal, with faint lines of dull gold running through them like old riverbeds. His eyes were amber, steady, and currently fixed on Dara with an expression she could not read at all. She held the cargo bay door open. Third bunk on the left, she said. She's still asleep. He said nothing. He moved past her with the careful deliberateness of someone who was holding a great deal of stillness in place with effort. She followed him to the crew quarters doorway and stopped there, leaving him space. He looked at the hatchling for a long time. The hatchling was still curled in the jacket, still breathing in slow, even rhythms. One small claw had hooked into the collar of the jacket during sleep and stayed there. The copper light from her scales made the old brown fabric look almost warm. Vaughn stood without moving. Dara could not see his face from where she stood, but she watched his shoulders, the tension in them, the long, slow exhale that moved through his whole frame when it finally came. Then he turned and looked at her. How did you find her? Dara told him, all of it, the scorch mark on the wall, the maintenance shaft, the game, the counting, the hiding, the 5 rounds. She told it plainly, without emphasizing anything. The way you tell someone what happened when you want them to know what actually happened. Vaughn listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, you played with her. She wanted to play. It seemed wrong not to. He studied Dara with the amber eyes. Why did you not report her when you first found her? Dara thought about it honestly before answering, because she wasn't in danger and she wasn't hurting anything. She was having fun. Reporting her meant ending that, and I didn't see a reason to end it yet. You were concerned for her comfort. I was concerned for everyone's. A happy hatchling is a quiet hatchling. A quiet hatchling means nobody does anything that makes this harder than it needs to be. Vaughn was still watching her with that expression she couldn't read. He said slowly, like he was translating something in real time, "You reduced the risk by removing the fear." That's one way to put it. It is the correct way to put it. He turned back to look at the hatchling. We have a word, Velsarath. It does not translate well into your language. The closest meaning is one whose presence a hatchling judges to be without danger, one a hatchling chooses. Dara waited. It is not a common thing. Hatchlings choose based on deep instinct, not observation. They are not old enough to reason. When a hatchling chooses a place to rest, it is a biological judgment about safety, about whether the scent and the warmth and the sounds of a place are compatible with being alive and young and unguarded. He paused. She has never chosen before. She is young. We were not expecting it for years. Dara looked at the hatchling in her jacket. She's a good hider, she said, because she didn't know what else to say. She is, and something in Vaughn's voice on those two words was not the voice of a diplomat at all. It was something much simpler and much older than that. She gets it from her mother. The hatchling stirred. She made the small, ascending sound first, the warbling note that Dara already associated with that particular variety of pleased consciousness, and then she stretched, one wing extending and then folding back, claws releasing the collar of the jacket slowly. She blinked. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at Vaughn. For a moment, she was very still. Then she made a different sound. Lower, rounder, the way a note sounds when it is relieved. She climbed out of the jacket in the ungainly way of something that had grown recently and had not fully caught up to its own size, and she waddled across the bunk toward Vaughn with a dignity she did not quite have the legs for yet. But before she reached the edge of the bunk, she stopped. She turned and looked at Dara. She looked at her for a long moment, deliberate, considering, with those bronze eyes that were clearer now she was awake. Then she reached under the edge of her own wing, fumbled for a moment with some inner folded layer of scale, and produced something small. She dropped it on the bunk, nosed it forward carefully, and then turned back to her father and climbed into the crook of his arm as if the matter was settled. Dara stepped forward and looked at the bunk. It was a scale, small, barely 2 centimeters across, iridescent, shifting between green and copper, and something in between that had no name in any color system Dara knew, still warm from where it had been kept. She looked up at Vaughn. He was staring at the scale with an expression she could read now. It was the expression of someone who had expected one kind of day and received another kind entirely. "What is that?" she asked. "A gift oath," he said. His voice was very quiet. "She has never given one. We did not know she could yet." He paused. "Among the Drachari, a hatchling gift oath means, 'I will remember you when I am large enough to be remembered by.'" The scale sat on the worn bunk surface and caught the light. Dara picked it up carefully. "I'll keep it safe," she said. Vaughn looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said, as if agreeing with something larger than the words. "I believe you will." News on a station travels faster than any official channel, because official channels have procedures and word of mouth does not. By the time Dara walked from the Cassidys' run back into the main body of Orin 7, 3 hours had passed since the hatchling had been returned to the Drachari delegation. In those 3 hours, the story, in various forms, with various details wrong, had crossed every community channel on the station and was currently spreading outward along the docked ship's own internal comms like a stone dropped in still water. A human pilot had found the missing Drachari hatchling. She had played games with it in the maintenance shafts. The hatchling had then walked into her ship and fallen asleep in her belongings. And when the ambassador had come to collect his daughter, the hatchling had given the human a scale. Some versions of the story added things that had not happened. Some versions had Dara wrestling the hatchling into submission, or singing it to sleep, or negotiating with it in Drachari, which she did not speak. One version, which Borin found and read to her with enormous pleasure, claimed she had been given a formal Drachari military commission. The truth, as Dara kept explaining, was simpler than any of the versions. Warden Sleth did not find the truth simpler, he found it worse. She sat across from him in his office, a narrow, over-organized room that smelled like recycled authority, and listened as he went through the list. Unauthorized entry into Restricted Corridor 7, tampering with a maintenance access hatch, failure to report a station emergency on Channel 4, failure to follow direct instructions from a station officer, prolonged unregistered contact with a diplomatic asset. He got through 4 of them before the door opened, and Ambassador Vaughan walked in. Vaughan did not sit. He stood in the center of the room and addressed Sleth in the way a tidal wave addresses a shoreline, without urgency and with complete certainty about the outcome. Any formal action taken against this individual, he said, will be understood by the Drachari delegation as a statement of values. He paused to let that land. We will understand that this station believes the correct response to a hatchling in need of calm was procedure and caution rather than presence and patience. We will note that the station's own teams, following every protocol, found nothing for 2 hours. We will note what found her instead. Another pause. I would not recommend making a formal statement of those values. The list of grievances in Sleth's hand slowly lowered to the desk. Vaughan thanked him for his time and left. Sleth looked at Dara for a long moment. She looked back. "Get out of my office," he said tiredly. She got out. Outside, 3 separate parties were waiting to speak with her. She recognized the insignia on 2 of them, the Korathi Scientific Corps and the Vaokai Diplomatic Attaché, which meant Borin's people had sent someone official, which meant Borin was currently in the food kiosk in a state of reflected importance. The third party was a Sirath scholar. The Sirath were small, multi-limbed, and operated at a constant level of intellectual excitement that made them seem like they were always about to sneeze. This one introduced herself as a researcher in cross-species bonding behavior, and then immediately began talking at a speed Dara's translator struggled to keep up with. The core of it, as best Dara understood, what had happened was not supposed to be possible. Drachari hatchlings did not self-select non-Drachari contact. The instinct ran the other way, unfamiliar species read as threat, and threat triggered distress. For a hatchling to cross an entire station, navigate a foreign vessel, and choose a sleeping location next to an unknown human, the human in question would have had to produce none of the signals the hatchling's instincts were built to respond to. "How did you do it?" the scholar asked. "What technique did you use?" Dara thought about it. "I sat still," she said, "and then I played the game she wanted to play." The scholar wrote this down, then she looked up. "That is the technique. I grew up near wildlife. You don't go towards something that doesn't know you yet. You let it come to you, and you match what it's doing, and eventually it figures out you're not something to worry about." She paused. "I wasn't doing anything special. That's just how you act around animals that don't know you." The scholar stared at her. "Humans learn this as children. Some of us. As a reflex, not as a studied protocol. My grandmother taught me. She learned it from her mother." The scholar looked back at her notes with the expression of someone who had found an unexpected answer to a question they had been asking for years. Later, Dara found Ambassador Vaughan standing alone on the observation deck, a long curved corridor with a full-length viewport looking out at the stars and the faint shape of the Drachari ship in orbit. She almost didn't approach, but he turned slightly when he heard her footsteps, which she took as permission. They stood in silence for a while. Then Vaughan said, "The talks on this station, you know what they concern. Territorial boundary, human expansion into the Drachari outer sectors. I read the news. They have been close to failure for 6 weeks." He did not look away from the viewport. The delegation came here because we were willing to try one more session. We were not hopeful. He paused. I watched my daughter sleep in a human's belongings, safe, unafraid, having chosen it freely. He was quiet for a moment. For the Drachari, there are things that arguments cannot say, things that only actions say. When a hatchling chooses, it speaks louder than any diplomat. Dara did not say anything. She wasn't sure there was anything to say. The final session begins in 1 hour, Vaughan said. He straightened. I think it will go differently than the others. He left. 3 hours later, the Orin Accord was signed. Borin found Dara in the cargo bay running inventory and read her the news feed summary out loud, including 3 different analysts describing the sudden shift in negotiating tone in the final session as unprecedented and inexplicable. Dara kept running inventory. You know what you did, Borin said. I played hide-and-seek with a baby dragon. He looked at her for a long moment, all 4 arms folded, eyes very large, very serious. Yes, he said, exactly that. 3 days out from Orin 7, with a cleared manifest, a paid invoice, and the particular quiet of deep transit lanes, the Cassidy's run finally felt like itself again. The scales sat on the dashboard. Dara had put it there after they cleared the station's exit corridor, propping it against the base of the navigation display where the light from the instrument panel hit it at a low angle. In that light, it shifted through colors that did not stay long enough to name, copper becoming green, becoming something that was neither, depending on which second you caught it. Borin had said nothing about it for the first day. On the second day, he had looked at it for a while and then gone back to his navigation calculations. On the third day, he sat in the co-pilot's seat, looked at the scale and said, "You should have it documented." Dara was eating a meal that had started as something warm and was now something cooler but still acceptable. Documented how? Officially registered. A Drachari gift oath from a hatchling to a non-Drachari is a legal event under Accord Maritime Code. I looked it up. There are 7 documented cases in 400 years, all between Drachari families, none between species. He paused. Yours would be the first. Dara looked at the scale. That seems like a lot of paperwork. It would be a lot of paperwork, yes. I'll do it eventually. Borin made the Voakai sound that translated most closely as I know you won't, but I have also accepted this. He turned back to his display. Outside the viewport, the transit lane was empty, just the slow pattern of stars at cruise speed, which was peaceful in the way that only deep space was peaceful, completely and without asking permission. Dara thought about the hatchling the way she sometimes thought about the animals from her grandmother's land, not as a problem that had been solved, but as a thing that had happened, that she had been present for, that was now part of how she understood the world. The way the hatchling had looked at her in the maintenance shaft with those bronze eyes. The way it had cheated at the game without any guilt at all, just pure practical intelligence applied to winning. The way it had tucked itself into her jacket with the certainty of something that had already decided. Animals always knew. That was the thing people who didn't grow up near them never quite understood. They did not guess about safety. They did not reason their way to trust. They felt it or they didn't, and if they felt it, they went toward it, and that was the most honest thing in any world. Borin, she said. Yes. Do you know what the Drachari will be saying about this in 100 years? He thought about it, probably something about the Orin Accord, how it was signed, the political conditions. He paused. Maybe something about the ambassador's judgment, his willingness to engage with the human delegation in a non-standard way. They will say a hatchling went looking for somewhere safe, Dara said, and found it in a human ship, and that the human let her sleep. Borin was quiet. That is what they will tell the next generation of hatchlings, Dara said, not the treaty terms, not the political analysis. They will tell them, once, one of us chose a human, and the human did not make her regret it. The co-pilot's chair creaked as Borin shifted in it. He had 4 arms, and in the years Dara had known him, she had learned that the way he arranged those arms told you more about his emotional state than anything he said. Right now, they were all folded, which meant he was feeling something he had not yet found words for. "You know," he said at last, "when I filed the incident report for my own records, I had trouble answering the field that asks what action the crew member took in response to the emergency." "What did you put?" "I wrote, the crew member sat down and counted to 10. He paused. "I was told this was not a sufficient description of events." "It's accurate." "It is exactly accurate." He looked at the scale again. "That is what I cannot explain to anyone who was not there. The entire thing comes down to one human sitting down in a maintenance shaft and counting to 10, and somehow that is the action that changed everything." Dara finished her meal. "It's not that complicated." "To you it isn't." "You count to 10 so the other person knows you're not looking, so they don't have to hide from you, they get to choose where to hide. It's the difference between being chased and being played with." She looked at the scale. She just needed someone to play by the rules. Borin had no answer for that. Far behind them, in the orbit of Orin 7, the Drachari diplomatic ship had already begun its course back toward home space. In the hatchling's chamber, which was proper and warm and stocked with everything a young Drachari needed, the hatchling was supposed to be resting. She was not resting. She had found a gap between the wall panel and the storage cabinet in the far corner, barely large enough, requiring her to fold both wings in a specific order to fit, requiring her tail to curl at an angle that was slightly uncomfortable. She had worked this out over the course of an hour. She was now fully hidden, pressed into the gap, invisible to the two caretakers who were growing increasingly concerned. She was waiting. She was very good at this now. When the junior caretaker finally spotted the tip of her tail, she burst out of the hiding spot with a triumphant smoke puff and skidded halfway across the chamber floor, delighted. The caretaker sent a message to the ambassador. Vaughn read it. He set his work documents down. He read it again. And then, alone in his office on a ship, traveling through the dark between stars, Ambassador Vaughn of the Drachari senior delegation, who had not smiled in 6 weeks of failed negotiations, smiled. He reached into his coat pocket and looked at the small photograph he had taken on his personal device. A bunk, a flight jacket, a hatchling sleeping like the universe had been arranged specifically for her comfort. He put it away and went back to work. Outside, the stars moved.